biggest edge you can have in your business is your reputation. That just who I am when I walk in a room does 90% of the heavy lifting in the rooms that we play in. So a lot of my work is done for me, and that's the result of the input of 15 years.
Is it fair to say you're the most quoted person in Alex Hormozi's book?
Yep. That is fair to say.
That's crazy. Like, Hormozi is what? Easily the greatest marketer alive at the moment.
We want products that can be sold in mass, and we want them at the highest price ceiling possible with really healthy margins so we can make a lot of money, but also so we can service and help a tremendous amount of people. Because long term, what really works is success. Success with whatever you're selling.
Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Traffic Podcast. This is the show where we share cutting-edge strategies on acquiring leads and sales for your business through paid traffic. And I am honored today to have my good buddy, my business partner in the Driven Mastermind, the $250 million webinar guy, or if you prefer, the $250 million webinar guy. Depends on whether or not you're a cup half empty or half full kind of guy. Jason Fladlien. Jason, thanks for being here.
Awesome. It is a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah. So the way that I've described Jason to other people is it's like going to a schoolyard fight knowing that your big brother is going to show up. Anytime I ever have to do anything when Jason's there, it makes me lazy, dude. Like it hurts my growth as a human because I just know like, oh, Jason's got this. Jason's going to be able to answer the questions. But the amount of value I've seen you provide, we're on a Wednesday call every single week together for 90 minutes, and you just melt people's faces with the shit that you know. And so I'm super excited to have you here on the podcast, providing value to our listeners. Appreciate your time today.
If I can serve and help, then I'm happy.
Yeah, I have no doubt you can and will. Speaking of, we always like to start off with a nugget, quick hit value, just so people feel like they're getting something out of the gate and we're not wasting their time with banter. Do you have something that you think the Perpetual Traffic listener would benefit from?
I think so. Yeah, the metaphor. So it's weird. I take this for granted, Qasim, but looking back at all the major record-breaking campaigns we've done, we've always had some sort of solid metaphor that the end user could wrap their heads around instantaneously. And I was just working with a consulting client the other day, and we were going through her webinar, and I'm just like, your metaphors, we got to step your metaphor game up. If you could have a metaphor here, then everybody could understand this. Right now, here's what happens when we're teaching concepts to people. They don't know them. So it's an unknown. So we can try to teach things that are unknown that they don't have any real experience with or understanding of. And you can see how that's really hard to teach, right? Or we can link it to something that is known. And then everything becomes much easier to understand. And so I was working with her through metaphors and kind of the rule set that I have with metaphors. Because sometimes people come up with good metaphors, but then they create objections. So I have another client. We were working on a metaphor, or they came to us with a metaphor for this roadmap for a course. And they're like, these are the 10 flags you're going to plan as you climb up the mountain. And I'm like, I wish we could redo it. It's too late. They'd already kind of shipped it out. But the metaphor of a mountain is you could die climbing to the top of it. It's hard. So that can create an objection. So we're always on the hunt for the greatest metaphor that doesn't create objections, that's easy to understand. And when people say, oh, now that I get this, I can relate it from a known to an unknown, and they learn more and it's more persuasive with the right metaphor. So my business partner and I will spend an hour like for a product that we're launching on just the perfect metaphor for it.
One of the things that impresses me about you so much is the amount of time you're willing to spend. You shared something with the Mastermind. It was a week or two ago. You're working on a webinar.
Yeah.
And I forgot what the ratio was, but like for every minute of webinar, it's however many hours of research.
Certainly seems like it, right? So the funny thing was, I have about maybe a minute in this webinar of we're talking about using Shopify as the e-commerce platform. So we're helping people to get started in business. And one of the components is the framing is storefront. And by the way, notice I call it storefront, not e-commerce site. Storefront is something people are more aware of than e-commerce site. So there's kind of a metaphor for you there, a mini metaphor, if you will. And I'm thinking, how do I present Shopify, best foot forward, easiest to understand, somebody can accept it immediately and not get confused by it? So I'm doing this research, And one of the articles I find in my research was by you. Remember that? And you had an article on like the 15 reasons why Shopify is the best e-commerce platform or something along those lines. And so I'm synthesizing all of these little bits and pieces. It's like a ransom note where you cut out every little letter from a magazine and you glue them all together. I'm trying to compress that in, and that is for maybe a minute of runtime in a webinar. But for that particular thing, I've spent 15, 20, 30 minutes just figuring out how I can make the very best minute of that presentation. Now, Qasim, I have the luxury of doing that because I've been able to build my business in a way where I can stay in my unique ability as much as possible. Not easy to do, and it took me about 15 years to figure that out. But I pretty much just focus on a couple things. The main thing that I mostly focus on is the webinars when it comes time to block and tackle, if you will. Other than that, it's strategic partnerships with people who have the best products that we can build the best marketing and the best funnels for them. So the main thing I get to focus on in most of my working hours is creating webinars. So I have the luxury of spending 50 to 100 hours developing a webinar because I don't have to do all the other stuff that most other people have to do in their business. Here's one more little interesting thing for you. So Perry, our business partner in Driven, he mentioned about a copywriter called Daniel Throssell, and he's like, "Oh, I think he's the best." So I went and signed up for his list one day. This was very early on when we just first launched Driven, and I got on his list and I started dialoguing back and forth with him a little bit, and I ended up running an ad on Daniel's list. And I don't know if that was the cause of it or not, but we had a copywriter come through because that was my whole thing. Is like, nobody knows how to write copy specifically for webinar funnels. So I'm going to train you in the hopes that maybe I can hire one or two of you in the future. Disclaimer, I do no hiring. My business partner, Wilson Matos, does all the hiring. But, I, as in the royal we of the company, hire. And Will's been showing me copy lately for this new project we're working on, and it's really good. Usually when we have an in-house copywriter named Matt who's worked with us for 10 years who's amazing, but he's overbooked, as any amazing copywriter will be very quickly. So now we need outside help for copy. And so Will's been sending me this additional copy, and I'm like, this is really good. And he's like, yeah, we got a new hire. And then Daniel emailed me like last week, and he was like, hey, I heard you're working with this copywriter named Paris. And then I'm like, are we? I just knew we had a copywriter. So I text Will and I was like, is that who it is? And he's like, yeah, that's who it is. So then I emailed Daniel back and I'm like, yeah, I guess we are. I didn't even know this. That's how hands off I am, that I didn't even know the name of the copywriter that we hired to write the supplemental copy. And I was just grateful. And I told Daniel, I was like, I'm grateful the fact that I don't have to get hands on, that I can stay hands off, so I can stay working on the webinar, which for this client and this particular project is the highest leverage value that I could possibly focus on. But I do that at the expense of pretty much eliminating most everything else on a day-to-day basis in my life.
Have you read 10X is easier than 2X?
Yeah. So Benjamin Hardy is I would consider him a close friend. He sent me an advanced copy of that even before it was released as feedback. In fact, one of the people in that book, Dr. Alan Bernard, I introduced him to Ben, and Ben ended up using him as a focal point for that book because Dr. Alan Bernard pretty much is the torchbearer of theory of constraints. So the book, The Goal, Alan is like the shepherd of that now. So theory of constraints is kind of a different way of looking at 10X, meaning if you remove this one constraint, you could 10X or 100X a business. But yeah, I try to live that ethos as much as possible that Ben talks about. I'm not as brave as Ben is on it. I really admire him because he's ruthless. Because you have to sacrifice your 80% to focus on your 20%. But then you do that, you lock it in and you get really good at it. And guess what happens? You have a new 80% that you have to sacrifice. And
it just never ends, right? You just continue to hone and to fine tune and to narrow down. Until which left is razor sharp, but it's the most clinically effective tool anybody's ever had.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, and this is something I struggle with. It's a matter of how big do you want to go, and is it worth it? So I've kind of eased off the gas in my elderly years. I'm geriatric in the internet business, been at it for quite a while. And I'm like, man, I'd rather get third or second place these days, but sleep well at night than get first place, beat everybody else, and feel exhausted. But
Better
maybe that's
earning
a temporary
ratio.
state.
Second place still makes a ton of money, but has to work half as hard as first place does.
That's how I'm feeling these days, where it's just like, okay, I'm not willing to make the sacrifices anymore that I used to make to get the edge that I used to have. So you get your edges in other ways. Now, with that said, like the biggest edge you can have in your business is your reputation. And so I'm very fortunate, and you've seen this many times, right, Qasim, that just who I am when I walk in a room does 90% of the heavy lifting in the rooms that we play in. So a lot of my work is done for me, and that's the result of the input of 15 years of relentless pursuit of excellence.
Yeah, well, that's not a small statement, man. I have seen it. It reminds me of, I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and I forget who he was talking to, but they were talking about how once a comedian gets to a certain level, they actually can't bomb.
Yeah.
Because people go knowing, oh, it's Chris Rock. I love Chris Rock. I've got 15 years of Chris Rock, embedded in me. So anything this dude says, I'm going to laugh at because he has that context to draw upon. And it's not that he's not funny. It's that he gets to be funny he gets to be meta funny because he has all of that history with you. And I feel like you have that same thing. You've planted so many seeds and you've trained so many people. I mean, dude, is it fair to say you're the most quoted person in Alex Hormozi's book?
Yep. That is fair to say.
That's crazy. Like, Hormozi is easily the greatest marketer alive at the moment. And you just did full-on multi-day consults with him. He consults with you, quotes you.
Yeah, it pays me too. It's not like I do it for fun, right? You get paid.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to feel pretty good, though. When Michael Jordan comes to you and says, hey, I need a coach.
Yeah, I'm like Tim Grover in that, right? I'm doing the strength training.
I want to talk to you a little bit about what $250 million in webinar looks like. But first, Ralph Burns got to get paid. So if you're listening, stick around because Jason Fladlien is about to drop many more knowledge bombs right after this quick break. And we're back here with Jason Fladlien, the $250 million webinar guy. And dude, that's not hyperbole, right? Like there's actually $250 million in what? Gross revenue generated via webinars? Yeah. How do you calculate that?
There's more than that, but after a while you kind of just, if it ain't a $500 million, it might as well be $250 million. So it's somewhere in between, but it's not a nice round number. But it's calculated based on either the webinars I've directly done myself, the webinars that I've assisted with others doing, both on the webinar live. Sometimes they bring me in just to close. Oftentimes that's what they do these days. Or that I've designed, been hired to create, or had some sort of meaningful input. Like I didn't just hang around on the sidelines and then took the credit for. Influentially $250 million clients, some of my clients alone based on the webinars that they've done that are literally my webinars sans a couple different, name changes, basically. I've had clients that have done over $100 million on their own just from the webinars that they modeled after my webinar.
The Perpetual Traffic listener is one half us, one half agency, traffic driver, and then one half business owner, a lot of DDC, e-com, B2B. The webinar is not a one-size-fits-all model, but it might be one of the more, if we're looking at a tool belt, it's easily a hammer or a screwdriver. It's one of those things that you're always going to need and just about anybody can use. So if you don't mind, and this is a tough question, but let's scaffold the webinar a little bit. Who's it for? Who's it not?
Yeah, it's not for as many people as people think it is. The side effect, you're talking about the comic that can't bomb anymore. He has this thing in the back of his head that's like, is my stuff still good or not? I don't have a litmus test, a measuring stick. So a lot of people come to me now because they know of my reputation with webinars, and they're like, I want to make a webinar for this. And oftentimes I say, don't. It doesn't make sense to in your particular instance. Now, with that said, in the instances where a webinar makes sense, it usually makes the most sense. It is a 10x where everything else is a 2x for the areas it makes sense. So we can break that down. Before we do that, the webinar is the output of a certain amount of creative, strategic thinking. And if you master the strategic, creative thinking, that's even more valuable than the webinar itself is. And so before I ever want to create a webinar, I got to have a damn good offer. And it can't be a 9 out of 10. It's got to be a 10 out of 10. And the difference between a 9 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10 is significant. It is massive. And so we work and start on how do we create the best offer possible. So when you mentioned I'm the most quoted person in Alex's book is $100 million offers. I have a testimonial from Alex saying that the best or the thing that he's learned the most from was a product he purchased from me on how to create offers. Literally, the guy who's the best-selling all-time in the history of the planetary system that is the Milky Way on offers says I was the best thing he ever learned from. So
is that product still available? Can people buy that now?
I don't know if it's available anymore. It's called Genius Webinars. I think it's still available. We're now going to update it because that product was created 6 years ago. So what I know now compared to what I knew then is significantly increased. My biggest weakness, Qasim, is I'm too ahead of the market. So probably most applicable.
For anybody that just heard Jason say that's actually not a humble brag. That's a really big problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah,
it is. So like I was too ahead in the webinar space. I should have claimed it much earlier because I could have really built a huge business on it. We were just doing webinars. We were never teaching this stuff. We created a course called Genius Webinars. And so Alex bought that. And I'm gonna update it now, but it's probably the most applicable in 2023 as we're recording this, even though I created it in 2017. But I want to create a new one. But so that's the course that Alex bought. It's called Genius Webinars. And he says it's the best course on offer creation and bonuses that he's ever seen. And so I'm like, that's awesome. And one of the reasons our webinars are so good, everybody likes the tactics and the techniques on the webinar. And I got some slick tactics. I can wow you with technique after technique after technique. But that is so less important than how do we create a really killer offer. And so that's a big part of it. An offer has 3 components to it. It's the deliverables themselves, it's the audience that you're putting it in front of, and then it's the messaging. So what's a good offer to audience A is not necessarily a good offer to audience B. An offer presented in this fashion versus that fashion. So I always look at marketing at the end of the day, Qasim. Here's a good metaphor for you. You have the chef and then you have the ingredients. If you're an amazing chef, but you got some really crappy ingredients, you're not going to cook that great of a meal. If you got the best possible ingredients you could ever find, but you don't know what you do in the kitchen, you're not going to cook a very good meal. Real magic happens. Now, we make good. We make do. Oftentimes, the biggest successes you see is they have really good ingredients and they're okay at being a chef, and that's good enough. Or they're an amazing chef, but
the market picks them up and carries them and then gives them the buoyancy they need to find better chefs down the line.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of guys I've seen that have really crappy webinars that still make millions of dollars. And a lot of it's because timing is a factor too. So where the market is at that time and the offering that person has that's in front of them, there's the convenience factor is a big deal. Whereas somebody wants a good enough solution today more so than a better solution tomorrow because they're in pain today. So they want a solution today. And so there's a lot of factors that are involved in this. So very rarely, and this is what we try to do, is try to have the very best offer with the very best messaging. So the best chef and the best ingredients. And this is why I typically don't create offers anymore from the ground up. We influence offers. So our biggest business model is we partner. We find people that have what we think is the greatest opportunity with the most leverage, the least amount of effort that's needed by the end user to get the best result possible. And then we partner with them. So they have the best ingredients, the proof elements, the deliverables, all the good stuff. And then I cook. I say, okay, let me put it all together and create a webinar for it. and a webinar funnel too, because it's not just the webinar, it's what happens before and what happens after the webinar. Let me put all those things together. So understanding psychology is a huge deal. It's very important. And then the output of that could be webinars or it could be something else. I had a client, consulting client, the same one we're doing the metaphor with the other day. And I flat out told her this cost. Now keep in mind, it costs about $7,000 for a 2-hour consultation with me. And she's paying big money. And I said to her at the end of it, I go, I don't even know if what I'm showing you will improve your conversions at all. Because who knows? What I find with this is it's more art than science. So I'm giving her better practices. I'm saying you're getting the best of the best. It's also a matter of implementation. Like I can give you the instructions, but how you implement them is greatly going to influence it. But sometimes the webinar can only do so much. So maybe you get a 1% lift, but it's 100 times harder to get there. And so I'm telling her, I go, this may or may not work. However, I am 100% confident that this will generalize. And what I mean by that is everything that I taught her on a micro level as a consultant, I always also teach macroly. So I teach things that are not only applicable in the moment, but can be generalized and universalized. So the things that I was explaining to her of how she can position and communicate, I know are going to go to every area of her business. And that's going to be useful to her. And she knew that too. In fact, she was like, when can I book you for the next consult? And I'm like, you can't. It blew my mind. I walked off that call the other day, Costa, and I'm like, she wants to pay me about $7,500 more. And I told her she has to wait a month. Just because.
Why? Just you want to see her execute?
No, I got this webinar I need to finish for this project that we're working on right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I'm sorry. I know you're disappointed that you can't give me more money right now. I'm aware of that. At one point in my life, I would have given one of my testicles to get $7,500. Now I don't have to. Now I can keep both of them and just be like, no, that's okay. But that's kind of where it was at. So to loop back to what you asked originally is webinars work the best under the following conditions, in my opinion. When you can sell something that scales, whether 10 people buy it or 1 million people buy it. So, your Solutions 8. Probably not a good idea to use a webinar for it because it's a service agency. If I showed up and gave you 200 clients tomorrow, could you manage them?
No.
Probably not. And
Right.
Would you want to, right? Because anybody with a wallet and a heartbeat isn't necessarily a good fit for you because it's very hands-on.
Well, and a point that you've made frequently to, other people that I've heard ask you this question, the type of person that shows up to a webinar is not my customer. I don't
Probably not.
Yeah, it's it's the tactician, the technician, the person pressing the buttons, the CMO, CEO, director of marketing types that are buying agency services. They're usually not carving out 2.5 hours in the middle of the day to go show up to how to run Google webinar. Now,
there's tricks that we can make anybody attend a webinar. So there's webinars and funnels that I could design. They're very esoteric in nature, and they're not applicable in 99% of scenarios. But there's ways we can get anybody to get on a webinar, and there's instances where that makes sense. But point blank, we want to swim downstream. We don't want to swim upstream. By the way, there's another metaphor for you. So we don't want to make it harder than it has to be. So in mass, we want to sell things that don't necessarily need a lot of hand-holding and hands-on because the qualification in an agency business or a service business is you got to live with the customer afterwards. So you want to be very, very careful who you let into your company's personal space. If you're selling just a course or you're selling a piece of software or you're selling something like group coaching, these are things that can be delivered in mass without a whole bunch of personal space that could be encroached upon. So this is why I like selling programs, especially hybrid. So I'll give you an example. Software is unbelievably great to sell on a webinar, provided you have the margins. So this is the other factor too, the margins. If you're selling a $10 thing, the attrition that you lose from a webinar isn't worth the gain that you'll make in conversion. So somebody's got to know the webinar exists. They got to register for the webinar. They got to show up to the webinar. Then they got to stay for a while on the webinar until they see the offer. There's going to be breakage at every one of those points. I'm okay with 80% breakage on a $2,500 product because I'll make it up with a quadruple conversion, maybe even quintuple it, right? Maybe even more than any other sales channel that I know of. outside of getting on the phone with somebody or getting in person with somebody. But I can't do that on a $10 product. If I lose 80% of the audience, but I convert 100% of the people that make it to the other side, I still make less money. So typically what we're looking for is products that can be sold in mass that are at the upper price ceiling for what that market can bear without other significant one-to-one type of interactions and opportunities. What we're seeing now, Qasim, is a lot of people are using webinars to set phone appointments and then using the phone to sell. That is a fantastic model. They're adding sales into marketing. We don't do that. I don't have a phone room. I don't have a phone person. We just do pure hands-off selling via webinars. And part of the reason is that's me getting second or third place in the marketing Olympics. I don't want to deal with a sales team anymore. I don't want to.
It is the worst labor pool in the world. God, if you're a salesperson listening to this, I love you dearly and deeply, but I don't want to be in the same room with you for an extended period of time. They're the hardest people to manage, to retain, to hire, convince of anything.
Qasim, if I lost everything, the first thing that I would do is I would find a sales room that I could win in because I could come in.
Mark Cuban said that too. Mark Cuban said if I had to start all over, I'd go sell software.
Yeah, I would go to a sales room where I could make like $2,500 a commission, and then I'd find a way to sell 10 of those a day. And I would be making $25,000 a day. Now, maybe not that fast, right? But that's how quick that math works. So selling on the phone is really powerful, but it's way more complicated. So you can play that game, and that game still looks the same. It's just with extra steps, but it still works really good. But I like selling price ceilings where we don't need somebody on the phone. Every market has a price ceiling where somebody's got to talk to a live human being before they'll say yes. So I want to push the price up to that ceiling where we don't have to get them on the phone with somebody and then deliver an offer that is so much better than everything else. So we will be the highest price on the market, but by being the highest price, we can invest more in the offer than anybody else can. And so therefore we will make an offer nobody else can match, and therefore we will win. So we want products that can be sold in mass, and we want them at the highest price ceiling possible with really healthy margins so we can make a lot of money, but also so we can service and help a tremendous amount of people, because long term, what really works is success with whatever you're selling. So I would rather you have 15 testimonials of people who have had okay results than you alone having great results. I would rather you have 100 people that have just barely good results than have 5 people that have out of this world results. We want a massive amount of success for the efficacy of whatever we're selling, for long-term winning. And so what we're trying to do is create an offer that will give people the most success. Now, we have to create an offer that is different. Otherwise, we're going to be limited to the same success rate everybody else is selling in. And so we need the margin in order to create the best version of the product that nobody can compete with. It's not the only thing we need. Capital is just one of many things at our disposal to create the best offer possible. But that's kind of why webinars will work really good. They also have to work in markets where people, like you were saying earlier, they have the capacity to show up and attend a webinar. So generally webinars, not always, but 70 to 90% of webinars are typically going to be focused on people who are at the beginning stages of the journey, not in the middle or not in the advanced stages. So people that are just starting a business, people that are just learning about a certain investing thing, people that are just really starting to get serious about their relationships, people who are just finally going to do something about their health where they're now taking it really serious. So people at the beginning of the journey are the most receptive to webinars. And those are my favorite audiences, by the way, because if I can get them early, I can safeguard them from the sharks and the nefarious actors out there who are all too eager to sink their teeth into them. And, mostly we deal with people who are cynic and jaded. They've already been beaten and bruised by several other people, and it's a miracle they even made it to us. I want to get them right away.
So, we're on Perpetual Traffic, and you kind of hinted at this a little as far as where they are in the funnel. But my experience in having heard you speak is you generally don't rely on paid traffic.
No.
It's pre-existing lists, referral partners, affiliates. Like where's your favorite traffic well, and how do other people find those wells and use them themselves?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, and this is this is what's hard for me in the world that I live in, is I do things so atypical. That's one of the reasons why it's so successful, but it makes me feel like an alien because it's hard for other people to relate and it's hard to describe. So I built my whole business around the concept of conversion. So the webinar, I find, is the best conversion tool based on my capabilities and based on the opportunities that I see in the market. And so I've excelled at that and became the very best that I could possibly be with webinars. Many people say I'm the best in the world. So how do I use conversion to drive traffic? Well, I get other people to drive the traffic, because if they drive the traffic to me versus anywhere else, they'll make more money. So they're affiliates or they're joint venture partners. And so I can use conversion to drive traffic. And that's what I like to do, because then I can stay in my unique ability. I can stay excellent in the one thing that I'm really, really good at. I'm not very good at driving traffic. I'm not very good at managing paid media. I don't really have the stomach or the taste or the patience for it, what to speak of the skill set related to it. So instead, I like to go to affiliates. Now, how do affiliates drive traffic? Well, here's where it gets really interesting, Qasim. And this is not a better position. It's just a different position. I envy some of these people that can scale up traffic. I don't think it's a grass is greener on the other side kind of a situation. It's just we don't have that scalability, but at the same time, we typically capture the best segment of the market. So, 20% of a market spends 80% of its dollars. And if you want to fractal it out, so there's the 20% within the 20%, right? Really, it skews to where about 2% of the market spends half of its money. So how do we find those 2%? So here's what we discover with affiliates, Qasim, is these are the guys that go and speak on podcasts like this, and they pick up 1 or 2 or 3 people here and 1 or 2 or 3 people there. That's quality, bro. That's not quantity. They go to events and they speak at events and they pick up 3 or 4 people here, 4 or 5 people there. They do very organic type of outreach, which makes them hard to find, but it's like that coveted diamond that you discover in the rough. You value it more because it was hard to find. And so our affiliates, typically, they've hodgepodged over the years a following that's not large in numbers per se, but hyper responsive. And they're the gatekeeper to that audience. And they don't put a lot of people in front of that audience typically. And we get in front of those audiences. And those produce the best amount of revenue for us. Because so we again, you talk about this ain't a fair game, my friend. I'm stacking the deck in my favor as much as humanly possible, coming up with an absurdly insane offer through a partner. So I'm finding the partners out there who have the best of the best, and I'm picking, and I get my pick of the litter because everybody wants a Fladlien webinar. So I get my pick of the litter, and then I go to affiliates, and I get the very best possible traffic you can get, and I don't pay anything up front. I pay 50 or 40 or whatever percent out of the profits of any sale that's referred. So I'm working with my favorite people in the market. I feel the people that are most likely to be successful, the 20% that are most likely to get the results. And they are the best customers to work with. And so I'm just, again, stacking the deck in my favor. And that's where we get our traffic. So I get my traffic by outsourcing it essentially to other people who get their traffic. And no affiliate I've ever found who pays for traffic from Facebook directly to try to plug it into a promotion ever beats an affiliate who already has an existing audience that they can tap into, usually via email. So to all you listening out there, the goal of, in my opinion, of driving traffic is to get that dedicated fan base, especially if you can still do it in email. I'm telling you, man, email still beats everything else in most markets. If you do nothing else but build that, however you build that, you're sitting on the gold mine of all gold mines. And it doesn't have to be me. It can be you promoting your own stuff. But obviously, we're looking for affiliates every damn day of the week to get more affiliates to continue to plug into the traffic, or for the traffic portion of what we create from an offer perspective and a funnel perspective.
That was going to be my follow-up question. If you're, for somebody who's listening, who's sold and says, okay, this all makes sense, and I feel like I have something that's worthy of putting in front of an affiliate, with the understanding that they don't have the benefit you have, which is 15 years of pedigree. Yep. How do they go out and find those affiliates? How are you looking? How are you approaching? What's the sales pitch?
Yeah, so this is how I did it. Step 1, create an excellent product. So way back in 2008, I created this product. I don't even remember the name of the product, but it was a nice little cheap $17 product, something like that. And a customer of mine who bought it said, man, I really like this. I have an audience. I noticed you don't have an affiliate program. Would you want to set one up so I could promote you? And I'm like, yes, of course I will. Now, I know some people say, well, you're teaching people how to do business, so you're selling to business people, Jason, so that wouldn't work. I teach people how to square dance. I'm telling you, you reach enough people through whatever mechanisms you can day one. Some of them will have influence and clout and will want to help you because they'll want to help people that have helped them, especially excellence. And so your product and your stuff has got to be absolutely amazing. It's got to be excellent. And you will get doors open for you due to that excellence that you can parlay into partnerships. You can parlay into affiliates. And so if you don't have excellence, everything else is infinitely harder. If you have excellence, everything else is infinitely easier. And so that's how I was able to do that. What I've taught younger men and women who come to me is you just got to find a way to plug into somebody's existing ecosystem, and don't be above getting your hands dirty. It's the equivalent now of doing the laundry and washing the car for the rich executive just to be on his side, and maybe occasionally he'll spit some game to you, right? The equivalent of that on the online thing is, hey, listen, I see you're doing this over here. It's amazing. I want to help you. Here's what I propose. I want to go to all the people that I've already said no to you repeatedly. I want to create and do all the work on a new presentation to put in front of them. Anything that we make in terms of sales from these people who you've already written off, I'll give you almost all of the money. Just give me whatever you think is fair. And you can start there.
Dude, you just got to stop talking for a minute. That was freaking brilliant. Yes. Who could possibly say no to that?
I mean,
and when you say the word affiliate, everybody thinks like, oh, you have to go to a ClickBank directory. No, it's anybody with an audience.
Yeah.
And if you went to anybody with an audience and said exactly what you just said, I love what you're doing. It's amazing. There's a bunch of people that have already said no to you. That's actually a pain point. It's like, hey, you remember all this money you didn't make? You remember the 90 out of 100 people that didn't buy? If I sold them something and this is freaking brilliant, dude. This is what I love about you so much. And then I give you all the money and you just give me what's fair. Yeah. Like, that's the inroad. Yeah. That's, you building, that's the first day of you being your own version of Jason Fladlien. And then 15 years from now, you have your pick of the litter.
Yeah, I mean, so we call it the Statue of Liberty close. Give me your poor, give me your cold, give me your sick, give me your huddled masses. I said that to Kevin Harrington once. We were having lunch in Van Nuys, working on closing a deal together. This is many, many years ago. And he's like, Statue of Liberty close. I like that. So I made it up at the time, but now I call it that. Yeah, and the money isn't important at first, Qasim. It's the result. So let's say you really screw the pooch. And by the way, I recommend people here, just so we have total clarity, sell their product to their own audience who's already said no to that product repeatedly. You can also sell other products if you want to, but I find, especially at the beginning, is let me sell your product to your audience of people who've already said no. Because what do you got to lose? If they say no again and you've already written them off and you don't think there's any money there, then any money is 100% net positive to you. There's no risk involved. But what you're really doing there, you're doing multiple things. First of all, if you don't convert, then you've learned something. You learned that you got to get better, or you got to get better at picking who you're getting in front of. You get the experience and the benefit of playing in the real world. You can't really learn anything in the safety and the comfort of being in a desk in an office somewhere where you're not in the field with real people who will tell you yes or no, and you will know your worth. So you get that benefit. It's the best learning experience you can get. Secondly, you can get a result. And if you get a result, now you have reputation. You're going to have to market that reputation. But now you go to the next person and say, I did so-and-so for this person over here. I think we can do that for you as well. Would you like to do it, or should I move on and talk to the next person? And now people want to do it because their competitor did it. Now you have leverage that you didn't have before. Now you also have a result, so now you're not seen as a risk anymore. And you have confidence. And then, you also can go back to the first person who you did something successful with. And you can say, hey, listen, are you okay with just keeping this money and not making any more? Or would you like to make even more? Because I got other things we can do. And all you need is that person to anoint you one time and endorse you one time. If after you delivered a series of wins for that person, you could say, hey, listen, It would mean the world to me if you could shout me out over here or help me by making a couple introductions over there. And not all of them will. It's okay if they don't. Some people are just, 3% of the population is psychopathic, right? So you can't rely on this always working. But if you do this enough, somebody will do it. They'll open up more doors than you can even ever imagine that you could never open up on your own any other way. And then you create that momentum that you can keep building on and building on and building on. And so my personal feeling is I would rather work with somebody else who has an audience than try to build the audience myself. That just works better for me.
When we come back, I'm going to ask Jason about his most successful webinar and what made it the most successful. But first, this ad break. We're back. You're listening to Perpetual Traffic. I'm Qasim Aslam here with my buddy Jason Fladlien, who's melting brains and blowing minds. And Jason, you've done at least $250 million in webinars. What's the single most successful webinar you've ever done, and what made it a success?
So we did a webinar, I don't know what point in time it was now, 2021, I think. And it wasn't a single webinar. Everybody thinks it is. They forget the details. It was a series of webinars over a period of 226 days. And then let me be even more accurate than that. Day one of this 226-day journey was literally, I had no idea what this thing was. I wasn't in the market for it myself. I attended a meeting that my business partner tricked me into attending. Okay, we'll get back to that in a second. So that's day number one. Day 226, when all the smoke had cleared and the dust had settled, $57.9 million. And
$57.9 million.
Yeah, $57.9 million.
Am I allowed to dig into that number a little?
Yeah, please.
So how much of that went to affiliates?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, was it something close to half? Because that's generally what affiliates get, right?
So the model that we worked there was 40% that we gave to affiliates. And then we gave 10% to brokers. And then we did something, Qasim, that this is some real secret ninja stuff here. So I'm kind of hesitant to share this publicly, but I will because of how amazing you are.
You hear that, Perpetual Traffic listener? You're getting this just because Jason's my friend.
That's
so you're
true.
welcome.
We would take affiliates and turn them into brokers. All right. So the general way of playing in this business is there's affiliates and then there's brokers. Brokers say, I will go out and find affiliates for you. And then whatever they sell, I get 10%. So if I go and find an affiliate, that affiliate makes $1 million in sales revenue. The affiliate will take whatever percentage they're promised, which in this case is 40. So they would take 400,000. And then the broker would take 100,000, and then we would take the other $500,000.
That's brilliant.
So I don't know how many of the sales were brokered versus how many weren't brokered. Rough guess, I would say probably 44% of the $57.9 million was paid to affiliates, and I love that, Qasim, because the more I'm paying people, the more that their livelihood depends on me, the more shoes I put on their children's feet. The better it is for business, my friend. So we are very happy to pay as much as we possibly can to as many affiliates as we possibly can. So I imagine 43% right off the top goes straight to affiliates.
And then from there, it's you and the strategic partner who actually had that product. And gets intrusive,
That's
Jason.
Okay.
So bat me down. But generally speaking, what's your take versus their take? How do you structure those partnerships?
Yeah, they're all different. So the partnership that we're in right now, that we're the main squeeze, like literally I'm pretty much doing nothing else with like 80% of my time is just devoted to this partner. In that deal, we've structured it to where we get not only a percentage, a pretty nice healthy percentage, I might add, we also get a portion of the exit. It's a phantom equity style deal. So in that particular case, the numbers, they're a little bit more fungible in terms of, well, we'll take a little bit less here because we're going to get more potentially over here. There's milestones and thresholds involved. This one particular deal took 4 months of back and forth just to figure the damn thing out. But there's big stakes here, and we think that this one will do more than the last one did, which was the $57.9 million one. There's a lot of little $1 million ones here, $1 million ones there in between, these big tentpole events, right? But this is, again, that 80-20. In any given run, in any given market, there's going to be one thing that's going to do better than almost everything else. And it's a Haley's Comet sometimes. If it ain't there, you can't force it. You got to be patient. So you're feasting on $1 million deals until you get the next big deal. This is how the way that the world is, at least in the way we play it. So, sometimes it's a higher percentage up front because there is no exit. Like in the $57.9 million, when it was all done and the partnership had run its course, we walked away with nothing. So a lot of money up front, but no tail. So we try to craft every deal differently. But we are really good at Cosm, and most people can't pull this off at the beginning because nobody truly values marketing. The genius inventor who's created his creation thinks the value is in the creation. But Mona Lisa would be worth nothing if there wasn't the lore around her. And if you put Mona Lisa in a dark corner of a warehouse and you duct taped her frame instead of putting it in a nice frame, it would instantly lose a lot of value. If it was painted by Joe Nobody on the street and not some sort of famous artist, it wouldn't be worth as much. So the marketing of the thing is the most valuable thing, especially at the beginning. Perception is greater than reality, but most people don't see it that way. So they will tend to devalue marketing. So it's really hard at first in these partnerships until you can assert and get your value, and until you can have deal flow where you're the hot chick at prom and there's 10 guys trying to get your attention. And so they all know that there's 9 other guys that are vying for your attention. Now you have some leverage there. So at the beginning, you kind of got to be, it's tough making these deals happen, but now we get very, very healthy percentages. I can't disclose the specifics for contractual reasons, but it's a lot. It's worth the squeeze. Yeah, it's worth the squeeze. Let's put it that way.
Jason, you wrote a book, One to Many, The Secret to Webinar Success.
Yeah.
If somebody's listening to this, is that the best place to start if I want to plug into the mind of Jason Fladlien?
100%. And I would recommend it to people who never are going to do a webinar. I seriously believe that will give you a foundation in marketing, because everything I do is strategic first. Everything that I do is at a macro level, and then we find ways to apply it at a micro level so we can be hyper efficient. So in that $57 million launch that we did, the real strategy is this, Cosm. I know we're not going to have much time to get into everything, so I'll give you the biggest leverage that we did in that launch from a strategic thinking standpoint. We rolled out a campaign first, and we did all this within the span of 226 days because this was a new thing. And the problem with new is you don't have any results. It's just a theory. Like, yeah, you did it. And maybe, you showed a couple of your friends and they did it. And then you showed all these other already successful business people and they did it. Okay. To a beginner, to a new user, the objection there is going to be, it's obvious. Well, of course you can do it. You're Superman. Of course your friends did it because you're probably lying. They probably didn't do it, but they're your friends, so they'll say they did it even though they didn't do it, right? And these successful business people, I've played that game before. It's really easy to crack the code when 4 digits of the safe have already been punched in and you only have to guess the 5th. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Oh, it's 6. Okay, wow, you made a whole bunch of money, but you already were going to make a bunch of money anyway. This is what the end user is going to think. They might be more polite in how they show up with it, but that's what they're thinking. So our biggest constraint there is that limitation of the believability on the customer. So what we did was launch a beta program. We said, hey, listen, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And you've heard me say this a million times, right, Cosm? This is one of the things that we teach a lot of these driven folks and the driven mastermind. I always tell them to roll out campaigns like this. They never do, but what the hell do I know, right? We said to them, we don't know if this will work or not. We think it'll work. And if it works, oh my God, it's going to work big. But maybe we got lucky. Maybe the people we showed it to, maybe it was a coincidence that they got lucky as well. So help us see if this is going to work or not. Now, most of you, I don't want you to sign up for this. I'm looking for specifically these types of people. And one of our criteria, Cosm, was like, you could lose all of this money and your life would not fundamentally change one iota. So we're looking for specifically people that can lose a bunch of money on the off chance that something might work and run an experiment. We're looking for people who will do this rough. We don't even have a name for it yet. We don't have a membership site for it yet. How many modules is going to be? I don't know. We might have to teach the modules over again because we don't know exactly how to teach it. But would you be willing to try it out anyway? And so we got 18 people to try it out. And then we documented all 18 of their results, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then when we got onto the webinar, 80% of the webinar was, here's everybody's results.
Done. Yeah.
I mean, come on, right? So there's technique. Don't get me wrong. We did a lot of technique in those webinars. I didn't do the webinar. My partner did the webinar on that one that we partnered with. I did the closing, which I think is the most important part of the webinar in terms of the close. But it was so teed up and it was so juicy. Now, he had the goods. He had the ingredients. He truly had a revolutionary thing. We just buttoned it up with powerful strategies. So before we ever sat down to create the webinar, we had everything going in our favor. And so that's a strategic principle. Now, here's the other thing I did, because if you want to get really good in this business, Cosm, you got to learn to do one thing that solves 1,000 problems simultaneously. So when we were running that beta, we solved a lot of problems simultaneously. One is we solved the problem of how do we train this thing? I don't know. We didn't know. So we figured that out. That's not that important, though. What's most important is we got a bunch of people over here to pay $10,000. So I call this tactic the rich financing the poor. Okay? So all these rich people over here paid $10,000 for what you're going to get the same exact thing for over here for $2,500. Oh, well, hold on a second. Not the same thing, a better thing. Because they didn't have documentation. We were making it up as we were going along. You're going to get this beautiful looking members area. You're going to get SOPs, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So you're going to get a significantly better product that just last month they paid $10,000 for. And you're going to get it for $2,500. And one of the most powerful persuasion principles, people want to get a good deal. One of the ways they get a good deal is they look at everybody else and say, ha ha, you paid a lot more money than I did. That's how I know I got a good deal, because I can rub it in your face that you overpaid for something, and I can feel really good about myself because I'm a really smart shopper and I got an unbelievably great deal. And so that's a strategic principle. We can apply that in a variety of different places. And so all of the stuff in the book, One to Many, which you can find on Amazon, comes from a strategic thinking, strategic perspective. And so I recommend everybody read it. And if you never do a webinar and you just walk away with the strategy, done. I mean, Cosm, you see me apply strategy all the time with the Driven Mastermind clients, right?
Yeah. I've said, and I don't know if this is an insult or not, but I've told people, I'm like, Jason's not really a marketer. He's a psychologist pretending to be a marketer.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what your book is too. It's a book on psychology through the lens of marketing. We would be remiss and get yelled at by Perry if we didn't spend just 45 seconds on the mastermind. If somebody's listening and they're looking for a mastermind home, can you give us the 45-second Driven pitch?
Yeah, I think Driven is the single greatest marketing mastermind that exists, which is nice because it's not even a year old yet. And we are the only mastermind that I know of, Cosm, that literally focuses on directly, without any smoke and mirrors around it, let's just make more money. We don't dress it up. We don't try to pretend that we're doing some amazing, wonderful thing. And oh, by the way, we collect money along the way. It's like, hey, listen, if you just want it raw, unfiltered, uncut, specifically, here's what's working right now. That's the theme of the mastermind. And then what we also do that's different, which I probably wouldn't have agreed to if I'd have known this going in. When Perry called me up and was like, hey, you want to start this mastermind with me? If I'd have known it involved this, I probably would have said no. But I'm in for a penny and for a pound. Now we do these weekly Wednesday calls, and those are amazing. So every week virtually, we're showing up and we're helping people. And part of that is, what's new, what's cool, what's going on right now. Other part of that is hot seats answering questions, calibrating it to individuals. We had, I did a hot seat, I don't know when it was, about a month ago. But Natasha came onto one of our calls. You remember this, Qasim? And she's like, here's everything I've been thinking of. And it was this very complicated document. And she wanted to do a webinar as part of it. So she was asking my advice. And she says, this is what we're thinking, structure, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, here's what you need to do, essentially. I didn't come right out and say it, but I walked down the path to the conclusion of all you got to do is make one social media post. That's it. And you'll sell this thing out. Now, you're overcomplicating it, essentially. So she came to me asking for a webinar. I told her to make a social media post, and they sold that thing out just like that. And
that's the world authority right now in Instagram direct messaging. That's Natasha Willis. She's absolutely brilliant. We should have her on the show.
That was my point to her. I'm like, you don't need to do what you see everybody else doing around you, that it looks like you're supposed to do these things just because everybody else does them. So right fitting advice, Qasim, I think, is the most valuable thing you can get. Not general advice, not sound advice that makes sense. Right fit advice for your particular situation. And so for her particular situation, the advice was to eliminate 99% of the stuff that they were working on to try to launch the thing and just launch the thing, And not just launch it, but launch it with just this position. And if I could launch it in just this position, then it's going to win. And if not, then everything else I'm going to do is going to be harder and probably be less successful. So I think that's what's really powerful about it. I thought I had the proof element. I was going to read it here, but I guess I didn't save it to my screen. But yeah, she sold it out just like that. And then I also did it in a way where she could set it up to sell more in the future, because a lot of marketers paint themselves into the corner. I don't want to make a bunch of money today, but not have a position to make even more money tomorrow. How do we make a bunch of money today, but use that to parlay it into even more money in the future? And that's kind of what we set her up for with that as well. But we see that all the time. Everybody comes with a whole bunch of ideas, not sure which one to do, and they're all on the outside looking in. They all look very sound and valid. Which one do you pick, though, out of all the things that you could pick? And for a successful business, the stakes are really high. I mean, if you're living in your mom's basement, you don't got a reputation to lose.
This is I hope this doesn't come off as obnoxious as I know it could, but I envy those people sometimes. There was something about that epoch in life that was just so, you don't realize how free you are, and now there's the constraints of success are interestingly pretty stringent.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's part.
I realize this is just a bunch of rich guys sitting around talking about how hard our life is. So I'm going to stop now before we get the hate mail.
That's part of why the context of the information is so important, because people learn to play the game that made them successful by taking these very risks and being very hungry, and oftentimes being fear motivated because they don't have anything. So they're trying to escape from that. And then they get successful, right? And now what do? They play defense instead of offense. They become now afraid of losing what they have, whereas before they were afraid of the lack of what they didn't have.
Yeah, you're afraid of not winning when you're poor. You're afraid of losing when you're rich, and being afraid of losing is it's a guarantee that you're going to lose on a long timeline.
Or even if you win, does it feel good anymore? I don't know if it does or not. Probably doesn't. And so I think this is valuable for us in the marketing mastermind. Now you got to make over $1 million a year to be a part of it. And we're capping it at 100 people strategically. So we have like 67% of that filled or something like that right now. So that's where Driven is. So if you're looking for a home and you're totally okay with being okay with making a bunch of money, then that's the place to go. If you're not there yet, buy the damn book. And then get there, and then join the mastermind.
That's awesome. Jason, I appreciate you coming here, man. Where can people find you? Where should they follow?
Yeah, 2 places. Go to Amazon and get the book, and then go to YouTube. I am so out of my element right now. I just got 2 million views. They emailed me, Qasim, and they're like, congratulations on your 2 million view milestone, which made me feel good, dude, because I'm releasing videos right now that are like 200 people view them.
That's the game we got to play, especially with the tube. That's awesome,
Yeah,
man.
so
Congrats. Go
help me
follow
out there.
Jason on
Everybody
YouTube.
costume who sees it, they're like, man, this stuff is really good. That's the first thing they say. Then the second thing they say is, man, nobody watches it.
Yeah, being the best kept secret on YouTube is depressing. I've had a couple of
Yeah,
those.
you're the same way, dude. Your content is amazing there. We need to get more of it out there. So follow both of us on YouTube.
That's right. Go pump up our egos on YouTube. If you're listening, subscribe and leave a rating wherever you are. Y'all have no idea how big an impact those ratings make. So if you want to do anything for Perpetual Traffic, if we've provided you any value at any point, leave a rating, maybe a nice one. Let us know what we can do better. You can go to perpetualtraffic.com/better. Follow Ralph at RalphHB, and you can follow me across any social channel at Qasim Aslam. Go back and listen to previous episodes. All the resources and show notes that we spoke about today are at perpetualtraffic.com. Jason Fladlien, last words to you. Any parting wisdom for our listeners?
Parting wisdom. Just ship, man. That's what I always live by. Just ship. So get it out the door and then make it better. But just get it. Every day show up and ship. Just ship, man. Just ship. Just put it out there and keep putting it out there.
I love that. Every day show up and ship. Yep. Heard it here. Jason Fladlien. Appreciate you, brother. For our Perpetual Traffic family, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Peace.